going to walk around the town to see the most beautiful places where Van Gogh was. And I will talk to you what he did here, why he came here, and what he found here. At that period, end of 19th century, Romanticism was still very up to date. Impressionists were a little known, famous because they were scandalous, but they were not influencing people really. So here this park was arranged by the responsible of the city, planting exotic trees right there along the medieval city wall. They have no leaves any longer, and it's the emblematic tree of Japan, and that's very important because Vincent Van Gogh was deeply influenced by Japanese art, so that's a link that is really important. And very soon after his arrival, he wrote to one of his friends called Émile Bernard, and he told him, you know, here I'm in Japan. Van Gogh painted many times this place. He went at the top of the hills and at the top of the hills over there because he wanted to have different perspectives. He had met in Paris Camille Pissarro, who is considered the father of Impressionism, and Pissarro had told him, you are not supposed to copy the reality, you have to propose your own interpretation of nature. So do accentuate the color, the perspective, and the light. And that's exactly why in many of his paintings and landscape paintings over there, it's as if he was at the top of a mountain. He is not. It's just to accentuate and to give a different interpretation of nature. So in the city, there are many reproductions of his works. And this is next to the arenas, the amphitheater, the Roman amphitheater that is right next to us. Actually, he painted it inside. And there is a little comment, and this one was sent to Émile Bernard, the guy I was talking about. And he wrote to him, you know, today I saw some bull fighting in the arenas, but there were not really fights because there were many bulls and nobody was fighting them. So actually he didn't see bullfighting, no corrida. He probably saw the local bull games, which are just games, and the bulls are not killed. He had made a portrait of this lady already. You see? So that's Madame Ginou, we know her name. But what is interesting is that if you look at carefully with the umbrella here, the shape of the lady, that's so Japanese to us. Actually, for Japanese people, they told me no. But that's very Japanese. And this is the similarity of the shape of these two styles of costume that really caught the attention of Van Gogh, of course. Again, a connection with Japan. Van Gogh was exploring all the surroundings and he was naturally attracted by the river, the Rhone River. He's always attracted by the water subject because it does reflect the light. So here is a reproduction of the Starry Night. So we are right next to the reproduction of this painting called Le Café le Soir, which means Le Café in the evening. What is interesting is that, as you can see, it's very yellow, but the upper part is blue. The explanation comes from Van Gogh wrote, I find no other pictorial technique to translate light than yellow color. How beautiful is yellow, I love this color. So he decided from this point that everything that would be under the light would be yellow. So the walls were absolutely not yellow at that time. It was just the color of the stone, the raw stone. It's not painting, it's sculpture. He really uses the pigments and the color as modeling, not really painting. And this is what creates the volume. So everything that is yellow in this painting is light. This area over there, it used to be the area of the prostitutes, the brothels. And these prostitutes are very important in Vincent Van Gogh's story because actually that's the only solution he had to have a sexuality, that is to say to pay for it. And he had a real collection with these ladies because he compared the situation of the artist to the prostitute, saying that they both were in the same position. That is to say, the society needs them, but they don't give them the right place. That's the place, so at that time they had to control prostitution because there were the syphilis, and Van Gogh suffered syphilis as Theo, by the way. He came out right from there, from the station, on the 21st of February 1888. He was arriving here. At first he found a little room in town behind the city wall, and very fast, at the beginning of May, he could rent a place right in front of this building that is so famous under the name of the Yellow House. So that's the little Yellow House. Van Gogh was renting this place at first as a studio. Then the idea was to create a community of artists, and he invited his friends, Émile Bernard and of course Paul Gauguin. They were not really friends, they hardly know each other at that time, but he wanted a place where the painters from Paris who were so exhausted could have a rest here. So the bedroom was right here. That was the bedroom that was dedicated to Paul Gauguin. Downstairs was a little part of the kitchen and the studio. This is where as well he painted all the sunflowers. He wrote to Theo, I have the intention to make an artistic places, so I'm going to paint a dozen of canvases representing sunflowers, so when the friends will come, they will find that beautiful and they will decide to stay. So he didn't consider that as work, he considered it was only decoration, wallpaper. So this is the place called Hôtel Dieu. It's a charity hospital, and this is where we have to talk about what happened between Gauguin and Van Gogh. So we don't know exactly what happened, but we know that on the day, the 23rd of December 1888, after only 2 months of cohabitation, they had a very violent dispute, and Gauguin left. He was afraid maybe something could happen, so he didn't go back to the Yellow House. Went to the hotel, and Vincent was so nervous, so worrying about being alone again, that the only idea he had was to cut his ear off. He took the piece of ear, he wrapped it in a handkerchief, he went to the brothel number 1, asked for the maid called Rachel, and he offered her his strange gift, saying, you have to keep that cautiously. And he left. When she discovered the strange present, she passed out, and so the police was called. Whose ear is it? Of course. And so they went to the Yellow House, took Vincent Van Gogh, and took him here to the charity hospital. So this charity hospital was built 16th century. Right after his arrival, the young doctor asked him, why did you cut your ear off? And the only official and unique answer he ever gave about this event was, well, that's very personal. When Gauguin was back at the Yellow House the following morning, he was told what had happened, and he was asked by the police, did you have something in this story? So, of course not. That's what he said, actually. And so he sent a message to Theo, you should come, your brother was injured. Theo arrived right away. He spent all day with his brother to check, well, Vincent was not going to die, and at night he had to go back to work. He was an art trader, but he was not rich. So at the moment when he was ready to go to the station, Gauguin had packed and had decided to leave Arles without visiting Vincent in the hospital here, without leaving a message, without saying goodbye, and they never met after this event. Gauguin left with Theo to Paris. Obviously, as you can imagine, Van Gogh felt completely abandoned, and he went back to the house, had different crises, then was back here in the hospital, and gradually the people became hostile to him. You have to remember, end of 19th century, he was a foreigner, he was red hair, he was a painter, he was apparently not taking care of himself, he was rather dirty, and the owner of the Yellow House wanted to transform it into a cafe, so they convinced the neighborhood of the Yellow House that people could be injured by Vincent, that he was dangerous, he could attack women and kids. So they wrote a petition that was to be sent to the mayor to ask for his confinement here back in the hospital. And people signed. At the end of this period, the young doctor, Mr. Felix Ray, understood that Vincent was suffering a mental disease and he should be confined in a psychiatric hospital more adapted to his disease. And Vincent was volunteer to get there. He signed for that. He wanted to make a retreat. That's exactly what he wrote. He wanted to get away from the locals' hostility. But in his mind, he would go for 3 months and then would come back. Gauguin would come back in his mind, and obviously Gauguin would not come back because that was completely out of his control. And he would start his story again, and unfortunately he never came back. So Vincent Van Gogh left Arles the 8th of May 1889. He had spent 15 months here in the town. C'est une galerie à arcades comme des bâtiments arabes blanchis à la chaux. Devant ces galeries, un jardin antique avec un étang au milieu et 8 parterres de fleurs. Du myosotis, des roses de Noël, des anémones, des reloncules, de la giroflée, des marguerites, etc. Et sous la galerie, des orangers et des lauriers roses. C'est donc un tableau tout plein de fleurs et de verdure printanière. Lettre de Vincent à sa sœur Wilhelmine, avril 1889.